CMMC 2.0. Why our folks should care in the first place. I mean, we're serving a mil-aero RF microwave business. Most everyone's a manufacturer. There's some software-related companies, some consultants. But why should we care? Honestly. I mean, I know people that are like, I don't even want to upgrade my computer operating system. It's working. It's fine. Okay? I don't really care about the internet. It's a necessary evil. It's working. It's fine. Why should they care?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the mission of why you started that solution and your company in the first place. A lot of the folks that we serve either served in the military or have some type of passion and drive that's pushing them to be in this space. So I always take executive CEOs back to that point of why they started the company in the first place. And that ultimately is why they should care about this. It's twofold. So it's protecting everything you've built, and that's why you should do it. Why the government wants you to do it is so that what you've built does not put them at further risk. We've seen nation states since I got into this industry. When I was a cyber attack victim, which we can talk about back in 2016, I've seen the impact that nation states play within critical supply chains. I've worked in all different supply chains. The defense sector is one that deeply resonates with me because both my parents were Navy and we lived on military bases, and the impact of contractors, the solution providers, was huge in order to help the defense mission. Most of the executives in this space, most of the people, don't get into it without something pushing them forward to want to contribute to their country in some way, shape, or form, or to the supply chain that supports our country from a defense and warfighter perspective. So I think that's why people should care is one, to protect everything you've built, which I've seen the negative side of that when I did not protect what I built because somebody got in and executed a cyber attack. But I've also been able to investigate over 1,000 cyber incidents since that point, which sounds like a huge number. But these cyber incidents are happening at a rampant pace. And at the core of that is our defense mission to protect, both our businesses, our communities that those businesses sit within, and then ultimately the connected ecosystem of the United States and how connected we are to the outside world. And at those intersections, there's a lot of things that are underlooked, and the government is trying to say, if we can help you set a standard and you can prove that to us, that's what we try to bridge the gap. Is there are opportunities out there to prove to the government that you value what they value from a standards and requirement standpoint, and to get them to pay the bill. So it becomes more of a partially funded Band-Aid versus the unfunded Band-Aid.
We're joined today on the RF Frontiers podcast by Greg Tomchick of Valor Cybersecurity. And Greg's got super interesting story, background, history. It's pretty atypical, but as many of you in the RF business and the mil-aero business know, CMMC 2.0 is looming. In fact, it's pretty much upon us, and it is a requirement. We love unfunded Band-Aids around here, but it is really crucial that we take it seriously and take a look at it. So we wanted to bring Greg here to have a candid conversation about CMMC 2.0 in cybersecurity. So many of our audience are manufacturers. And so some of them will go, well, why the heck does that apply to me? Well, guess what? It does. Number one, it's on your contracts. And number two, everybody uses some sort of resources nowadays that are definitely going to expose them to the threats of cybersecurity. So Greg, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, really happy to be here and looking forward to talking about these important topics, but really telling the truth that a lot of people shy away from because they feel like they have to be in a good light for the ecosystem to serve the buyer or the end defense contractor at the end of the day. And I really want to get real and vulnerable with your audience to make sure they know where the skeletons lie so they can make the right decisions for their business and not just for the seller or the ecosystem.
Yeah, well, that's what we're about here. We're about real and vulnerable. We're not here to sugarcoat anything. We really want to explore honest conversations with authentic people about, how the real world works. So it's really fresh.
We've been going through it with our own companies, right? So Chuck and I both run small companies, and we've experienced the CMMC pain firsthand. So for us, this is not an abstract topic. This is something that we've started to go through and started to feel the pain. And so I think we're excited to learn from you, Greg, as we share our knowledge with the audience, but also for us personally to learn a little bit more about how we can do CMMC better. So,
Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning from your guys' experience as well. We've seen all different shapes and sizes in this space, and really want to find a way to meet your audience in the middle here, so they can go forward with hopefully a shifted perspective on how the ecosystem's set up, both for failure and for potential success. And as they get the rush of the rule that just came out that we're going to talk about, how to kind of think slow but act fast. I think that's something we encourage anybody we speak with. Is we know your heart's beating at 1,000,000 miles a second. Like, let's think slow, but then we can act fast going forward when we have the right information.
So it's November 18th right now, I think, and we just had a big rule go into effect November 10th, right? What happened
November
on November
10th.
10th?
Yeah, November 10th.
Yeah, what was that?
So that was the finalization of the certification requirements. So now in amendments and renewals, new contracts, there's a new clause that says, one, you need to be CMMC certified. Then there's another clause for the actual level you need to get certified at, whether that's level 2 or level 3 for the higher end primes. Most people are level 2.
There's a 3.
Oh yeah, there's a 3.
There's a 3. Yeah. I don't think we're going to ever get to 3.
Yeah, we've only had one client that's been a 3 request, but they were already getting government audits before that. They basically produce software that produces weapons and bullets and some of the things that go boom. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different animal altogether.
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. But I'm not going to say all of our business is widgets, if you will, to way oversimplify it. But a lot of our business is widgets. So we do, widgets and some software. But the software is typically design software.
Yeah.
Now it's possible that our customers might have other software, but not our industry. But that's okay. I want to speak to everybody, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I think that will, and you tell me if you think I'm wrong, from an audience perspective, is how the cybersecurity industry overall has tried to fit into the defense market. And there's a lot of things, and we talked about this in our discussion, that I think rang true. Is the cybersecurity industry overall is it's big on selling tools and having resellers versus here's what you should do that's best for the business, not what's best for us from a commission perspective. And
Yes.
Right.
we're seeing that run rampant with CMMC, where
Yep.
companies are going with the easy button, and people are just stacking them with the tools they get commissions on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they realize they're not compliant. So
Well, that's the SaaS model. The SaaS
Yeah, it
model is develop something, get a partner, get the partners to sell it for me. Let's not put in any work. Let's just go ahead and shove this solution in and see how it sticks, if you will.
I think the other dynamic too is historically, I think the people who bought cybersecurity services were big companies, probably with their own internal IT department. So, but now we have small businesses, many of whom don't even have an IT department, or it's outsourced to an MSP. And so you have, I don't want to say uneducated buyers, but kind of buyers who are susceptible to being sold on solutions without really understanding what they're buying. So there's like this asymmetry in information. You have a very educated cybersecurity vendor seller, and then you have a small business who really doesn't really know anything about cybersecurity. That's not their core competency. They don't have internal staff to know how to buy the correct product. And so I think the environment is ripe for, I don't want to say small businesses to be taken, but for them to be influenced in ways where they think they're solving a problem, but in fact they're not.
They create
right?
more chaos
They
and
create
confusion.
more chaos. Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we've even experienced that in our own
we
business.
experienced, yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah. So we engaged a very expensive cybersecurity consultant who he brought us some really complex solutions that weren't a good fit for a relatively simple business. And and I actually personally know a good amount about cybersecurity, but I don't know how to buy cybersecurity services. So it's easy to fall into that trap.
That's where a company like us come in. Is I've always, from the beginning of my career, I've seen the value of being vendor agnostic and being somebody that can look at all the puzzles or all the pieces of the pie and say, like, here's some options of what you could buy, and we're not going to make anything on the back end to try to be the honest broker. Mm-hmm. And it's always gotten the feedback of appreciation from companies like yours. Is we're not coming in to sell anything besides our expertise and our ability to develop the standard, and we don't get commission off any tools that you decide to go with, so we're not jaded in what we recommend.
Right, and I think that's a key question that buyers need to ask their vendors is, hey, how are you being compensated? It's almost like in the financial industry, people, if you read the Wall Street Journal or whatever, personal finance articles, they talk about, hey, make sure you know how your financial advisor is being compensated. Make sure that their alignments are aligned with yours. And it feels like maybe we need to have that same message for the cybersecurity industry. I think maybe buyers need to ask their vendors, hey, how are you being compensated? To really understand if you're fully aligned. So I think too, a lot of people, small businesses might think, oh, I don't do any classified stuff. They can take my information. It's nothing special. But I think what they don't think about is a cyber attack. It's not just about stealing your information, right? It's about disabling your company. That's what a real serious cyber attack does. And so if a cyber attack disables your company, you can no longer serve your customers, you can no longer serve, and if you're mission oriented, like you said, to support the U.S. military, the United States as a country, you can't support your country or military if your company is disabled because of a cybersecurity attack. So I think that's an important aspect that people need to think about is it's not just about people stealing your information. It's about a cyber attack bringing your company down, stopping revenue, right? It's going to be hard to make payroll if you don't have revenue. And so it's really a threat to continuity of business, I think. So that's how I think about it.
Well, we have DX rated orders.
That's right.
And it's RF cable assemblies. We're not going to call it rocket science. It's RF, so let's not underestimate and pretend like it's super easy. It's not. But they're DX rated orders, and 99.99999999999 we haven't run into an issue yet where someone has to exercise a DX rated mandate to make sure that they can actually get their product so the program can continue. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter overwhelmingly until the one time it does. And if they shut us down, now, I go back to your comments earlier, Greg, warfighters are in jeopardy potentially, right? In that, someone could go into theater in a month and they could be less prepared because we're not on time because we got shut down. And that's real.
Yep.
It is. Yeah, it's all about money and power. So, data is the oil and the network ownership is the land. And when we think about physical crime and how physical crime has rolled out throughout history, it's always been about money and land. And it's the same with the digital world now, where companies want to steal your information ultimately to bring you down to your knees to request money, or they want access to your network and your vendors in order to have access to further land to set up their organizations to be able to see who's coming in and out, to be able to try to rip those people off. And I think that's what a lot of people still don't see from a cybersecurity perspective is once a company gets in, or once a nation state or defense contractor supply chain is taken advantage of, and I saw this with my own cyber attack, they do double, triple, quadruple extortion over time. It's not just they steal your information once, they sell it on the dark web, maybe they get you for a couple $100,000. It takes place over a long period of time. And I saw that with my cyber attack. It was a initial hit of I had to go pay $75,000, $100,000 for an investigation to get my business back online. But they ended up coming back. They would reach out to my personal email. They would reach out to our customers years later because they now owned the land that we set up and we built our business house within. And what I tried to do when I got into the industry after I got out of professional baseball, because I made that realization early on when I saw it continue to occur, and I thought it was a one-time event. Somebody would rob my house, and they wouldn't come back because they got what they wanted. They'd go to the next house. But they realized that that land was now theirs, and they wanted the money out of that land. So they wanted the continual data, the monitoring of it. And that's what we see companies, once they're breached or once they have a cyber attack, what people call it today, multiple times, they start to realize how important it is to have a security standard and then to be able to continue to keep that security standard up to date. And that's what we're trying to do at Valor, is ultimately help people understand that when you have a security standard in place, whether it's to align with the Department of Defense requirements, you're trying to get your software SOC 2 compliant. If you have a standard that truly protects your business, you'll be compliant by nature. You don't have to think about compliance as a separate value funnel or a separate budget expense. It's all under your cybersecurity standard, and you've protected your business to benefit you as the owner and you as the organization, and that is going to be recognized by all of your customers, whether it's the Department of Defense, whether it's your CPA who may have requirements, or any government agency that you do business with, both domestic and international.
All right, so the stakes are high.
Yeah.
Well, let's not skate by the journey that you just painted here. You mean former professional baseball player. What team?
St. Louis Cardinals.
Okay, there you go. And cyber attack victim. How the heck do you go from pro baseball player to cyber attack victim?
Both my parents were Navy, so we moved all around different Navy bases. Every generation of males in my family has joined the military, and I decided, and my parents gave me this opportunity to try every sport, and I really linked on to baseball and had some great mentors along the way. But we lived on military bases, and what I saw in military bases was a mix of different cultures. So there was people from all around the world, all different countries, all different backgrounds, and I always wanted to find a way as a kid to create value based off of the dynamics of the ecosystem, which, it's kind of just like a market on these military bases. Everybody has a lifestyle and they have, needs and gaps in that lifestyle. So I had that entrepreneurial mindset as a young kid. Ended up going to Old Dominion University, which is big military bridge school. Had a great baseball program that was up and coming. And they had a family that donated money back to an entrepreneurship academy or entrepreneurship school at Old Dominion, and I was the first student to put a business through there. Coincidentally, that business was software development, because I saw every business needed a website or an app in order to excel and market themselves, or they had some type of software solution that needed a technical team to develop it. And we were able to serve some great folks. I was running that business, and we were doing extremely well. We had about 12 people. We had just expanded to India to try to do 24/7 development. So we're always trying to push the bounds forward there. And then I ended up getting drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals in 2015. Still had that business, and at that time, I didn't know what it meant to go away from that business full time and kind of do it remotely. Obviously, I was traveling with college baseball, but I always had that home base. So brought on a partner. That partner wanted to build the India team, and it was in my second baseball season. So it was the the end of 2016, and I was at spring training, so the hot Florida air coming in after a long practice. We would start at 8 a.m. We would practice till about 11:30, eat lunch, and then go back out for a couple more hours. And we were coming in for lunch break, and typically I would check my phone just to see if anything blew up, and I had gotten a text from my business partner at the time and said, all of our systems are down, and one of our clients, who was a major yoga studio, because I was an athlete, I was able to kind of get us into a supply chain and a franchise of yoga studios, and they'd shut down all of our other systems, but they put derogatory content on the scheduling of this yoga studio. And if you know anything about the the fitness space, people are scheduling around the clock. So that blew up, and that was like our highest symptom of the sickness that was taking place. And that's how I learned about the word cybersecurity, what it meant. Before that, we had put in some configurations and things, but I didn't, as a business owner, I didn't know what cybersecurity was, or really didn't even know what physical security was. But until you have that heart in your stomach feeling, I think cybersecurity is not real until that time. And what I try to do now is tell the story in a way where people can have that feeling for a temporary period of time through my story, to hopefully drive them to take action before that negative event takes place. And obviously I've come in on the back end a lot of times and help people recover from it, but I don't want people to have to do that alone, and I want to get to them beforehand. And that's why we're having this type of conversation, but really to tell the story in a raw way, I think is what benefits people. We learn from stories. Sometimes we don't even learn from our own experiences, but I had that negative experience and it really impacted me. And so once I hit my glass ceiling in baseball and realized, I have this passion to serve the Greg that didn't know what cybersecurity was, serve that Greg beforehand that had a great business that could have stayed in business and really continued to grow if I knew this topic. It lit a fire in me, and I went out, learned from some great people, and have a great company today serving defense contractors and helping them do what's best for them, but also align with what the requirements are to help them continue to grow their business.
I love that story. I mean, I think a business that started because the owner themselves originally felt the pain is a business that really understands the customer in a deeper way than anybody else can. It's much, much different than, your story is so much different than, say, a private equity firm looking around and saying, hey, where's all the money going? How can we make the most money? That's a totally different origin story than what you're talking about, which is, man, I had this horrible event that affected me and my business partners personally. How can I help other people? That's a big difference, between your mission and some of the other market players, I think.
Yeah, that's one of the, and we can get into this a little bit, but that's one of the reasons since I started the company, I wanted it to be self-funded or funded by the customer. Mm-hmm. Because I saw in past companies I worked for before I started Valor, the metrics that venture capital, private equity put on them, it took a lot of the founders away from that true mission of why they got into it, right? It was probably to protect, the local mom and pop shop, but they had to go, to the Fortune 500 company to make sure that the venture capital, private equity company would continue to invest. So they get jaded over time, and there's nothing wrong with that model of wanting to start a company to sell it and make people wealthy along that path. But I really wanted to find a way, and it's definitely been the path of most resistance to start something from an Upwork post and a website to grow it to what we've gotten today. Versus we've had people offer us money, and we knew that they had all the right words to say we're going to allow you to continue to have that mission, to say no where you need to say no to certain things that may change that. It's served us well to be able to serve the customer in the way that we feel like we needed to be served, and not always look at the dollar amount or the metric that sometimes would take us away from doing what's best by the customer. And that's something I really value as a person, and allows me to get up in the morning and really have that same belief, which continues to build that fire in my belly on who can I help next, which I think is an important question for all of us.
Yeah, well, I've never heard the phrase "path of most resistance" before, but I absolutely love it. And I think in life the greatest satisfaction comes from a really hard fought battle. So maybe the path of most resistance is the most satisfying. I don't know.
Well, we've talked about a similar topic on this podcast before, certainly amongst ourselves, the three of us, about we were talking because we were starting out, about VCs and or about software companies, SaaS companies, where everything is a commissioned product, right? And the question is, do the VC metrics drive bad behavior? And I only mean bad behavior in the sense of from the customer's perspective. Does it really serve the customer?
Yeah.
So being bootstrapped avoids those challenges. It doesn't free you from the challenges, avoids those challenges in the first place of being led around by the reins in the wrong direction that only benefits the potential sale. It's what I call win disease, what I need. I'm more focused on what I need than what the customer needs, and I consider it to be a disease. So I applaud you for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of that goes back to, I was fortunate to play a sport that was, it forced you to be selfless until obviously when you get into the business side of it, you have to be somewhat selfish and throw the pitch that you want to throw or defend things in a certain way. But when you did what was best for the team, it looked best for the coordination of the event, which was kind of an interesting dynamic I'd take into business, just like all of us take our past and into the businesses we run. But baseball is just one of those sports where it's very team-oriented, and I'm glad I was able to be a part of that sport, which has set me up for today.
I think having a passion, and when you start your business as a passion, that bleeds into everything, your marketing. And as a buyer, I feel like when someone's selling us something, especially CMMC, you can tell that. You can tell someone's passion and what is driving them, and if they're being genuine, and are you getting commission on this or not? And I think something businesses, I know we've talked about this, is that when you are like that and you sell like that and you market with passion, you're attracting clients who are like that, who appreciate that. And it's that differentiation where I think some people just assume when you're a small business, especially like us, that like you're just going to take any client you can. And that's not the case. So when you are a buyer and you see that in a seller, you form this bond and this relationship, whereas you might have clients that don't appreciate that, and you might not necessarily want to have them as a client. I think that's just an important differentiation that is appreciated then in that mutual relationship.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think in marketing, there's this word that we use in marketing a lot, authentic or authenticity, right? And so when you hear a story like Greg just told about, how his old company suffered a cybersecurity attack, I mean, he doesn't need to fake authenticity.
Right.
This guy's authentic, right?
Yeah.
And that comes through in your marketing. That comes through. Customers get that, and so marketing becomes more than just like brand awareness and fancy logos. Right. Marketing, when you're authentic, marketing can become just telling your story, just telling the truth.
Yeah.
And there really is no better marketing than telling the truth. There really isn't. So
yeah, it's the hard sell versus the soft sell, and I feel like when you create enough value and you have a story like you guys have highlighted, which is a passion story to help others, people can feel that. But I think it also shines through in the service and solution you develop.
yeah.
I feel like there's only been, one time, maybe it was like the first deal where I felt like I had to kind of hard sell because I was trying to get that first or second customer.
Yeah.
But since then, we've created, and this is probably because of that bootstrap model, we've created a service model that is truly best for the customer, and we benefit on the back end. We have a 6-month program to get companies CMMC ready. Most companies want to charge half up front, half at the end, and it's 3 times our price. And why we've done it that way is because we can meet the customer where they're at. Their contract cash flow may be coming in monthly, so they're able to pay on a monthly basis. They can pause at any time. Most companies get you into contracts where you can't pause based off your business. Say you're going through a contract life cycle and you have to put together bids and proposals that month, and you need to kind of take a pause on meeting some of those requirements. We're happy to do that, and that's in our contracts set up for the customer versus the customer having to ask for it. So it provides that flexibility we need in business. Nobody likes to be put into a template structure, but when the template structure is put together to build that flexibility in, it feels right to me as a business owner if I'm engaging a service. So, we try to find folks that fits within, and typically they're really appreciative if they can take a month off while they're, maybe they're going on vacation and they can't contribute, so they want to pause on things for a month, and that comes along with the flexibility. And we want to see more services like that in the ecosystem. A lot of cybersecurity is tool driven. So it's that, how do we get more MRR or monthly recurring revenue? How do we get our tool into more places? But what I found when I was working for larger companies as I was getting my feet in this industry is there's a lot of tool overlap. So we would go in as a vendor-agnostic partner and save these corporations millions of dollars in both people and seats and security tools that they had deployed because they had been sold on this capability, and they had overlap on overlap of different capabilities, which isn't always bad. But if you have 10 people sitting on the same floor doing the same thing, but only 9 of them, or only 1 of them is doing the actual work and 9 of them are kind of sitting there and billing an hour. The CEO, the people paying the bills, don't see that.
That's right.
But on the ground, those people know it, and they're just getting off easy by billing those hours. And the corporation at the end of the day that is employing those individuals, if they're outside consultants, are loving that because they can put them on other projects. And that's the big 4 consulting model. And I saw that early on and said, how can I take what's good and what's bad into an industry that needs these capabilities from a national security perspective, but also from a business protection standpoint, and try to do it the right way. Obviously, we aren't perfect, but we like what we do, and we're passionate about it. And it's to have that perspective has really benefited the customer. And I think that's why we're in business at the end of the day, is if we can benefit the customer and create enough value. And I was an economics major in college. You get that value back in return, and you can build a company off of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the Big 4 model. It's also the model of thousands of Beltway bandits, as we call them here in DC. Yeah.
Well, that's been a recurring theme for our guests now as we continue on our podcast here. We keep hearing this customer-centric approach. We know that this business is very, very spec heavy. And they think that the customer approach oftentimes stems from the specification. They want to design a new product. Hugely important, especially in this industry where technology advances at a very rapid pace. But there's that other aspect as well. That is, how do I design and innovate on the product or the solution while still satisfying what the customers really, really, really need? And this has been a recurring model or a message, if you will, that I think about every day, and I know Sean and Ariel think about every day, but our guests are bringing forward with these stories and this attitude toward how they take their business to market. And I really think that's going to be the difference for the truly successful ones who evolve and grow and are really well lauded and respected and loved, frankly, and those who just are out to be mercenaries and just make a buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a key point there, and we've seen this recently with folks in the RF space, but also in the manufacturing space overall, whether you're manufacturing software, you're manufacturing a piece and part, is the government will pay you to build a product for them. How do you find the benefit of that intellectual property for your own company and turning that into now your product catalog that you can go offer to others? And I think sometimes that second piece does not get visited because you're on a contract, you've been on this contract to develop this piece and part specific to the government. But we see a lot of companies, and they're in business for 20, 30, 40 years, and they're still piece imparting, developing things for the government versus taking that solution and saying, we've developed this for the government, but our great team has developed this. How can we take some of that intellectual property and almost templatize or think about how it elevates the value of our company? And then you start to resell that to different government agencies. And I know a lot of people do that, but we see that more and more often happening, and it gets missed. But something like CMMC, where you look at how do you productize stuff so it doesn't link back to the government from a sensitivity standpoint. Maybe you get a drawing, it links to a product that you've developed in the past that is your specific proprietary blueprint or software stack. And then you're selling that back to them. But when you start to customize it, that's what they look at as that sensitive information that needs to be secured up to their standard. So it's a little distinction. I wanted to mention that as you were talking through that. I thought that's something the audience may benefit from. We've seen companies do, and they're able to get some of that commercialization value where it can become another revenue stream or another partially funded potential Band-Aid that they thought was a Band-Aid, and maybe it's something that can elevate them and heal their business on the other end.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I think there's this continuing tension between build whatever the customer wants on the one side, and come up with ideas that the customer doesn't know they want until they see it. There's this tension between those things, and you see it's so tempting to just build whatever the customer wants so you can make payroll, right? But at the end of the day, just kind of blindly doing things without having your own ideas and your own vision really turns you into a reactive company, right? So on the one hand, you can't have a vision that nobody wants to buy and build things that nobody wants to buy. On the other hand, you can't just build things that customers have told you they want. There's got to be some middle ground there, and that is the part that I think the defense community misses so much. And there are so many beltway bandits who just get an RFP from the government and says, oh, they want us to do that? Okay, now we're experts in this thing. Oh, look, we're experts in this. Now we're going to make ourselves experts into this thing the government already says they want to buy. So there is a real tension there. And you see a lot of companies, like you say, who exist or subsist for 20, 30 years making payroll, but not really creating unique and innovative services or products. You see it all the time.
Definitely.
So let's circle back here. The folks are paying the big money for this ticket to this episode is this CMMC 2.0. Okay. And we really need to understand how it's impacting them directly, and frankly, what the heck they need to do about it. I mean, it's because you can go, if you just go to the initial webinars and you look at the initial training, your head will explode. You just think, oh God, we talked about CMMC, level 3. Yeah. Do I need to do level 3?
Yeah.
Oh my God. What do we need to do? And how do we begin to go about it? And by the way, there's a deadline. So by when?
It goes back to the initial part. Why should people care? We live in a heavily digital world. How do you set up a security standard over time that makes you protected and compliant? I think it goes back to that. That's what the government wants you to do. And when you go to these other webinars out there, whether you go to a town hall with the CMMC accreditation body or some type of vendor, it's the typical what you see at a conference. It's here are all the problems in the world. Here is the tool or solution that solves it. And that's the narrative we see across the board. Go pay for the CMMC accreditation body training, or there's some type of upsell. And that's not going to happen here. It's ultimately, how do you build a protection standard internally that first protects your business and then makes you compliant? And I think that's what everybody needs to walk away from this thinking. There's NIST 800-171, which these requirements are based off of, and you can build it based off of that. Where it gets complex is NIST develops descriptive standards, not prescriptive. So it doesn't tell you exactly what you need to do. And that's why this whole business of consulting has stood up. You have the gap between descriptive, so you need to encrypt all your information, but what information? So to get a prescription of how you actually need to apply this to your business is unique to you. And
I love that. Yeah.
Most companies don't have that capability internally to bridge that gap.
Nope.
That's where typically we come in. But at the intersection of that bridge, there's a lot of people tugging at your pockets for more than just let us help you with our expertise. It's let us help you with our expertise, and we're going to throw along that roadmap a lot of the tools that we make money off of, because that's best for best for the private equity venture capital or for our pockets.
Yes.
At the end of the day, and so really considering your own business. Most of these CEOs, executives, owners of these businesses that we work with, they know their business better than anybody. But it's always good to get the outside perspective of, here's what a security standard could look like for a company of your size. Tell us what's best to protect your business based off of your perspective. And most companies don't do that. What happens is the business owner gets so confused that they feel like they have to lay down and just let somebody come in and do what they need to do. It's like a surgery, right? It's like, I trust the surgeon. Just do whatever surgery you want to do on me. Hopefully at the end, I walk out of here and I'm in one piece.
Yeah,
And that's a lot of what's happening, honestly.
Wow.
So they have to understand that component of it to even get started. And as I mentioned, kind of, think slow, and that's that slow thinking process, and then act fast. And that's ultimately what people should think about doing is, how do I think slow through this and not get consumed by the confusion that takes place from the government speak, the legalese, the acronyms, and ultimately look at this as there is a way to simplify it. Hopefully this session helps them simplify things, but you have a business process that you go through to deliver a product or service. Write that business process down. What tools do you use to do it? And then ultimately, how do we put a protection standard that the wrong people don't get into this process? And it's ultimately that simple. That's what the government wants to see. When you get into encryption standards and multi-factor authentication, all those different words that the security standard and capabilities of the security standard continues to talk about, it all starts there. And they call it scoping, but ultimately it's map your business process out, write it step by step. Think about if you were on the outside, and sometimes it's hard for business owners to do this. If you were on the outside, how would you take advantage of this business process? How would you shut it down? How would you steal the intellectual property that we talked about? How would you find where the money is going, either from the government or from you to your vendors? How would I get in the middle of that? And if you think about that process and you take a kind of like a physical security approach, if you're familiar with that space, how would someone get into my building? And I think that's where the gears start to turn. And when we can ask those questions, oftentimes the client, the customer, the business person who's responsible for this project, they start to come up with their own answers, which is a pretty fascinating process of self-discovery for them, or organizational discovery. And that's why I love to be a part of this process, because we get to see the entire business and we get to help people discover what they need to do. Obviously, there's a framework through NIST to follow, but oftentimes the best security implementations come from that business owner, because they know the business better than anybody, and they say, oh, we need to do multi-factor, but here's a way we could do it that would fit best for our culture and our team based off how they currently operate. And like I mentioned, a lot of consulting companies, a lot of owners are just allowing those companies to come in and do what they feel is best, which in my mind is not a partnership. It's like you said, it's kind of like it's not necessarily a bait and switch, but it's kind of a lay down, we'll do the surgery, and hopefully you guys are compliant at the end. And we've seen companies come to us after those surgeries and say the surgery didn't go like we expected. We spent 6 figures, sometimes even more. We really need help. And we try to take a step back and not necessarily be surgical, but help them through that self-discovery process. Sometimes you have to get there quicker. So you have to be like, hey, we need to take these 5 steps yesterday in order to move the needle. And over time, they start to get out of that both emotional and what we look at as technical debt, because we're able to help them self-discover, which is empowering for them. And then they start to see the 2 pieces that I mentioned, the protection of their business. And if they do that right and they protect their business process, they get compliant by nature or as a result, which is, I think, a very important distinction here.
Yeah. So there were 2 things you said in there that I want to kind of dig in on a little more deeply. So you talked about descriptive versus prescriptive. That's a great way, I think, to frame the CMMC. But you also used the analogy of a surgeon or the expert surgeon. And I think it's important to note that the cybersecurity professional has not taken a Hippocratic oath the way a surgeon has.
Some of them feel like they have. But.
Yeah, some of them feel like they have, indeed, yes. So that's number one, is that there is no ethical, I don't know, maybe there is some sort of ethics body in cybersecurity, I don't actually know, but I'm sure it's not as mature as the medical industry. But the other thing about the surgeon analogy is you may have an expert surgeon operate on you, and you might finish the operation and you wake up and you realize, oh my gosh, my arm is gone, the guy amputated me. And you say to the surgeon, I can no longer do my job, I needed that arm, right? And so, well, it had to go. And we've seen that for our own CMMC journey. We've had people tell us, well, this file sharing site you use, it all has to be, locked down and FedRAMP sort of compliant, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but that's the website we use to deliver software to customers. The entire point of that website is to share information with customers, right? And so I think that the expert surgeon or the cybersecurity professional, they don't really always understand what the point of the business is. It's more than just locking down the business. There are some cases where we want to share information publicly. We need to. And so sometimes the prescription that the cybersecurity professional comes up with prevents us from doing the things that we need to do in our business. So I think that ties into what you said about ultimately the business owner has to understand how the business operates. And if they just kind of lay on the operating table and wait for the cybersecurity person to do whatever, they might find that they wake up and they lost an arm.
I think I think it's just the simplicity of when you're looking for just to bring it back of like steps of what businesses can do, which we did not do, is finding someone, if you are contracting with a CMMC expert, is just the simplicity of, are they even trying to understand your business? Because if they're not, you're not going to be able to work together. There's no relationship.
That's so true.
We have done that.
Yeah.
And so they come in and are trying to explain something to us about our business, yet knowing nothing about it or even asking us about it, and we're supposed to take their advice, and it just made things more complicated and caused a lot of problems. So I think just for businesses as well, especially small businesses, is if you are looking for a vendor, a CMMC vendor, is just being able to find someone who, just like you said, is just trying to understand your business first and then allow both of you to have insight onto your own business as well as them so they can best help you. Otherwise, how are they going to help you when they don't know anything about you?
I think that's a great diagnosis of our situation.
Yes.
We had an expert who really wasn't interested in learning about what we did.
No, not at all. And he also didn't listen to anything that we said. So we were very explicit about our timeline and what we wanted to do, level 1 versus level 2, and it was very much just bypassed and being, telling us what to do. You don't want it. We're like, well, we do because we're telling you that.
So we had made an internal business decision. We're going after level 1 first. We're going to start with that. Then we're going to do level 2. And every time we had a conversation with the cybersecurity guy, he told us, you don't want to do that. You just want to go right to level 2. I said, no, but that's the decision we made. We want to start with level 1.
Well, it also, and it caused a lot of time. So as a small business, we don't have the resources. And so as a team, we're investing a lot of time in understanding level 1, and we're being rushed to level 2. And then a lot of things in level 2, you need to do level 1 first, which is how we wanted to do. But we ended up spending a lot of time and resources, which took away from our business. And our business is run on a lot of innovation as well. And so it took away from that. And I think that is especially for small businesses, can be in some cases catastrophic, because you're missing out on opportunities, you're missing out on innovation, because your whole team is just confused trying to work with someone who doesn't understand your business at all, and it just becomes more of a problem than a solution.
And that's where the big businesses have an advantage. They have an IT staff in-house that understands the business.
Yeah.
Right? So the internal IT staff goes to the team meetings, they know what product the business produces, and so the big business has that advantage. The small business, we have to work with part-time consultants essentially, right? We don't have internal full-time IT. And so the challenge of understanding the business is just amplified.
So let's we're dancing around this. Let's stop dancing. We're throwing out a lot of terms that some people may not have digested the way you've digested them, the way I've begun to digest them, and certainly the way Greg knows them. Okay, Greg, you said we need to think slow and move fast. How fast? There's deadlines on this stuff. So how fast do we need to move?
Yeah, it depends on. So this all started in 2017, so it's been out for quite a while, and I want to preface with that because they did the fair warning shot, and then 2019 with the SPRS score, and now we're in 2025 where they're saying there's a certification requirement. There is a 3-year rollout period, so it could be any time between November 10th, so last week, and 3 years from then. So you think 2028. So it could fall anywhere in there. But by that 2028 period, they're saying that those two clauses that we mentioned, there's a certification requirement at this level, is mentioned. It's going to be in every contract that is considered to have federal contract information, which every contract does, or controlled unclassified information, which is level 2 CMMC requirements. We see about 70% of contracts in the whole ecosystem are going to be level 2. So I think about if you are a service provider, either a prime or a subcontractor on any 70% of those, then you are going to have that certification requirement before 2028. The hard thing to predict, and this is kind of the business forecasting side, is it could come across your desk tomorrow with an amendment. We just had 2 of our clients that got amendments and said, in order for us to give you the next phase of money on this contract to do the work, you have to align with this amendment by December 1st. And they got that at the November 11th timeframe from their contracting officer. So now they're saying, well, we were on track to be level 1, but now they're saying we need to self-assess at level 2. And there's a lot of risks that come along with that. What companies did in the past is they would just fill out yes to everything on there. And what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of hostility in the space. So first you have the government side, which is trying to make headlines with certain companies doing it wrong, so people learn the lesson and then do what they expect to do. We see prime contractors reporting subcontractors that they've wanted to get out of their ecosystem for a while, but they've depended on them for a specific piece or part of that puzzle. We've had 2 or 3 companies over the past couple of months, and this was part of the ramp-up process, where the prime contractor would go to somebody like a contracting officer and say, we want this subcontractor to do a DIBCAC audit, which is basically the Department of Defense's audit arm. We would like them to do it on this subcontractor because we feel like they're lying about their SPRS score because we've seen how they've shared information and they're just sending it everywhere, to their ecosystem, to their vendors, but also when they send it to us, they put it in email and don't encrypt it. So there's a lot of hostility and negativity around that. So you definitely want to avoid that piece. That goes back to just basic, business fundamentals and doing things the right way by people.
So you're saying that it's not just the government that's sort of calling people out, but actually primes as well.
Primes and subs. So there's a whole whistleblower hotline that anybody can report any company, and then the government starts to investigate it. So if they, if Valor was in the ecosystem and somebody didn't like Valor, then they could say, DoD, we suspect that Valor is not protecting up to this standard. We know it's in their contracts. We would like you to look into it. And sometimes the government doesn't have the resources to do it, but what they'll do is send a letter or put an amendment in the contract to say, we now want you to do this CMMC level 2 requirement. If you get an auditor to come out within 90 days and send us a letter, like, we'll lay off. So it's a little bit of they're firing from the hip, but then there are more and more percentage of contracts that are having this in there by default because it's a more sensitive type program.
So potentially you could even have disgruntled former employees calling that hotline, I guess, right?
Yeah. So Aerojet Rocketdyne was the first company that had a false claim litigation. And it was multiple millions of dollars, but it was a former IT employee that had a disgruntled conversation between the executives of the company to say, we need budget for these things to get compliant. And the executive team was like, we'll just report 110 SPRS score in the procurement system because that's where we feel we are, versus having the evidence behind it. So
Yeah.
what do you know? A couple weeks later, they get a notice from DIBCAC to say we're coming in to do an audit. They ended up failing. They realized that they were false reporting. There was whole litigation around it.
So
And there's a lot of lawyers out there being birthed from
Yeah.
the legal actions they know are going to result.
And it doesn't even have to be a disgruntled employee. It could be just an employee who feels like he's doing the right thing for the DIB, right?
Yeah,
So-
yeah. I think about like the Snowden thing, and everybody has their own perspective on it. But there's people out
Yep.
there that are reporting things that they don't feel right as by them as people. And I think in the defense space, it's specifically unique because we have a lot of people who feel deeply tied to the mission
Yeah.
of protecting, the warfighter or the national security mission. And there's going to be a lot more of those whistleblowers and those types of actions. But if you do the right thing and you have that standard in place, somebody can be disgruntled and call you out. But ultimately, when it comes down to the conversation with the right people, they know who you are at
Yeah.
the foundation of it.
Yeah. That's a really interesting aspect of it.
So we know the time frame now. We know about the legal aspect. God help us all. So let's just quick. What are the three levels?
Yep. So level one is federal contract information. So if you have a contract with the government, you have federal contract information. That's basically contract terms and conditions. Most of us, if we have a contract, we have that. Contract schedules and revisions. I would say 99% of companies that have a defense contract have FCI. Where it can become that 1% is that small bolt provider that never gets any contract terms. They just get a small PO that says produce this part as a part of your catalog, but they never know it. They might not know it links back to a defense contract. It's just a provider that is producing a bolt.
So
Go ahead.
Okay. So I have a really specific question for you because it's been bothering me in my own head. So let's say that we have a conversation, a pre-sale conversation, right? Yeah. During the sales cycle, a conversation with a government end user, and he says, hey, I want the product. I would like to have a product that does this and this. Does your product do that and that? FCI?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
So so marketing and sales communication is different than
It is.
post-sales communication.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot of commercial companies out there that get asked about defense work, and the pre-sales, until you mention this is going on this contract with this number and this program, and that gets documented, that's where FCI is ultimately going to start.
Right. Okay. So as soon as you sign that PO and you start talking to the end user about, hey, just want to verify this is what the product is going to do upon delivery, now we're in FCI.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Then you start to get into CUI, so drawings, maps of bases, contractor and personnel. So this links back to kind of PII, which is where cybersecurity ultimately started, personal identifiable information. So if you have lists of contractors that are entering and exiting military bases, their social security numbers, obviously those identities are considered CUI. Infrastructure details, so software maps, server information. A lot of people think of bills of materials and POs as FCI, but those identifiers, especially if they have a identifier for a contract, is considered CUI. And then financials, any systems, QuickBooks, NetSuite, those systems that process a lot of the financial data of what contract this is coming from, how people are paid on that contract, the equipment that goes along with that contract, all of that data is considered CUI. And this is the piece that organizations spend the most money on up front, is scoping. We have companies come to us that say, we've been scoping for 5 years. We've had 3 vendors come in and try to scope this out. If you can get scoping right, the rest of the process is ultimately pretty much a breeze from what we've seen. And this is where we spend a lot of our time in our 6-month program. The first 2 months are scoping. We're making sure we understand the business. We're making sure the business owner or the executives have mapped out their business process, and we've teased out what is not going to be included in this scope and what is going to be included. And Having that segmentation or saying our entire business is defense related, we're gonna secure our entire business with this standard. Those two distinctions are a huge cost savings, as you can imagine, on what you're protecting and what's in scope. So I encourage, that's that think slow. Is what happens is companies, they have their hearts beating really fast, they don't know what to do, so they just make a decision on scope based off of what somebody tells them is the right way to go. But you really have to think slow in the scoping, and it goes along with, when you're starting anything, if you think slow and really consider what the customer wants, you're going to build a better solution versus saying, Joe, this business really wants this solution. Like you mentioned earlier, let's build that solution, then we'll build the next solution. And so it's kind of that really thinking slow through scoping is a huge benefit to companies as they go into the process here.
I think that's some really great specific advice. I mean, I know we've almost fallen into that trap, so that's great advice about think slow in the scoping.
So once the scoping is done, okay, you have the self-audited level 1. Is that correct?
So you have to apply those. There's 15 security requirements, which is pretty basic. If you're a Microsoft shop, if you have Microsoft Business Premium, you can click a couple buttons and then train your personnel on them, and that makes you level 1. So you basically apply those simple configurations and rules and then train your people, and that gets you to level 1 CMMC.
Okay. And then level 2, you need an outside auditor.
So level 2, there's 2 elements. So level 2 self-assessment and then level 2 certification. Right now, a lot of companies are getting the requirement to submit their self-assessment. So basically what the government is saying, or what the contracting officer is saying, is tell us where you stand, and we're going to use this as your first point of record. What a lot of companies did early on is they just answered yes to everything. Mm-hmm. And then they go back in 2 years later, now that this is a requirement, and they answer no to half of them. So that tells a false narrative that it honestly shatters trust. And we know business is all about trust at the end of the day. But ultimately, that gap between level 1 and level 2 comes down to business fundamentals. It comes down to budgeting, and it comes down to getting the right resources and capabilities to execute them. A lot of defense contractors, like you guys mentioned earlier, outsource IT and then the readiness piece of this. So a lot of that institutional knowledge gets left. The CFO, the financial person, doesn't want to get involved in the budgeting because they don't really understand it. So you got to kind of look for that as you think about from level 1 to level 2, either self-assessment or certification. Obviously, certification is a flashlight on your entire business. So you need maybe a more sophisticated level of expertise than to do the self-assessment, the budgeting, the roadmap, to be able to answer them honestly, to make sure you can prove it. If somebody were to, right when you click that submit button, if somebody were to knock on the door, could you prove what you said you were going to do through, having the right documentation, proving the right processes, and making sure ultimately that scope was properly done for your unique business.
Okay. And what else do we need to know relative to the levels and the certification?
So the self-assessment happens. A lot of companies are getting requests right now for self-assessments. Tell the truth there, even if the truth is not pretty at this time. We highly encourage that because we've seen that blow up multiple times. And then we have this whole prove framework. So when you put something into the system, and this is extremely relevant when it comes to the certification process, we have these 3 steps to prove. So you develop documentation, which is policies, procedures. Those policies and procedures need to be backed by technical evidence. So think about screenshots of your software, the rules you put in place, the multi-factor authentication you have. And then this last piece, which is critical, which is a Q&A. We take companies at the end of our process, at the end of the 6 months, we basically assume the role of the auditor, which is a huge part of this certification process, where there's going to be 3 experts from these C3PAOs or audit organizations that come on site. And they are your traditional CPA type auditors. So they're basically going through their checklist. They're taking evidence that you printed out or asking for screenshots from your IT personnel or whoever is running that component of it. And they are asking questions, and not every auditor does this, but most auditors are asking questions to try to trick the person who's answering them. So it becomes kind of a test for the organization. And we develop the questions we believe they're going to ask based off of that scope to make sure that they don't get tricked. And a lot of companies don't do this. And what happens is the auditor comes on site, they throw their IT person in front of the auditor, and they are just completely ripped apart. And what a lot of people don't realize is this is not the government a lot of times coming out and auditing. This is a commercial organization. They call them C3PAOs, but they're in business to make money and get people certified. So if they have to come back out because the IT individual or the person that's answering the questions fumbled on a couple of things or wasn't fully prepared, they're happy to come back out a second time, a third time, and bill more hours. So you take that typical audit cost of 25 to 70 grand, which the CMMC accreditation body has said, based off your organization's size, 25 is the starting point and 70 grand is how we're going to control what an auditor can charge. That is the first time they're coming out for that initial week with those 2 or 3 auditors. What we see happen is they catch them on a couple different things. They ask a couple questions early on. They realize where the skeletons are, where these people may be not as informed in. They ask that question and say, we're going to give you a 90-day period to remediate, or be able to better answer these, 4 or 5 questions in order to pass you. And we'll be back, on this date, and they'll come back out for 3, 4, or 5 days. I'm not going to say every single auditor does that, but we have seen a lot of them throughout this process. And I think there's, roughly 1,000 companies that have been level 2 certified. So it's continuing to increase every day, but we've seen auditors use it to their benefit, where companies have not done the preparation they need to do. And it ultimately comes back as not 25 grand for a small company, but then it becomes 50 grand, and then it becomes 75 grand. And they've reached that limit. And then the auditor says, all right, you're passed. But you blew your budget out 3 times what you thought it was going to be, plus all the preparation costs, which is its own budget that comes up where mistakes and pitfalls and come along.
So do you think all the C3POs are going to have that kind of business model, or is there room for somebody to innovate a flat fee audit? Because I'd like to sign up for the flat fee audit, please.
So many people are in our audience are going, holy hell.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't want anything to do with this thing.
That's what I'm saying right now. I think we're going to go sell balloons to children, I think, after this.
You hit on a key point. So because this ecosystem is commercialized, so the DoD has said we want a commercial certifying body called the CMMC accreditation body, and we want to create an ecosystem of private organizations that are serving it. So you have the readiness partners, which is what Valor does to help people prepare. Then you have these C3PAOs who are the auditors. Since it's there's a commercial aspect to it, and it's mostly commercial, what we've done is we've talked to a majority of the C3PAOs because we want to set our clients up based off what's best for them. So we want to find the lowest cost, but also the person that we know is not going to screw them over in the long run. And when they've seen the way we develop documentation, the questions we ask, how we prepare companies, because they now know what we do and how we do it as a preparation company and the type of IT companies we work with or how we train the internal IT company, the amount of hours and the cost of that audit goes down. So we've had customers get audited at 12.5 versus 25 because they've seen our documentation, so they have benefited from that gap in their understanding, which typically they're going into environments and have to re-understand how they've developed documentation and how they do things from scratch. But they know that we have a way of going about things, and there's a lot of companies out there like us that have done this. So if you find the right partner on the front end, or you find the right auditor, and we've had companies come to us and do this that have not paid us $1 that said, we've interviewed 25 C3PAOs. We found a great guy that was willing to talk us through how we go about doing things as a business. And that conversation, because we took the time to do it, saved us a bunch of costs on the audit. What a lot of companies do is they look at these C3PAOs as just audit companies, and they don't have the conversation. So they say, they go to their ecosystem and say, does anybody know an auditor? And then, one of their friends recommends Joe, and Joe's like, all right, we got to go do this audit, and we start from scratch. So we have to understand the business. We have to make sure their documentation is right. So you can kind of see that gap in the understanding, which consultants love, right? They love that gap in understanding because then they can bill more hours. So if you're an outsourced model where you outsource IT, outsource your readiness, I would definitely encourage folks to look for that gap already being filled. So auditors that have worked with that IT company or auditors that have worked with that readiness partner, what we typically like to see if somebody comes to us before they've engaged an IT company, before they've done any readiness, is we try to find them the right pieces to the puzzle that are ultimately going to save them money for the right auditor. So if they're in manufacturing, we try to find them a C3PAO that already understands the manufacturing, of this type of bullet or this type of widget, so that they already know the ecosystem, they know the industry, and that benefits the company from a cost perspective. And that's typically where we get our services paid for as a part of that savings. And I think a lot of business owners like that when you can prove a return on investment versus Valor coming in and saying, our cost is X. You just kind of absorb that cost to get ready, and there's no benefit long term to earn that back. And I take that, as a former athlete, as a challenge to say, what if we could get our costs paid for as a part of the savings they get from the audit on the back end? And we've proven that time and time again, and it's something we take great pride in, is saying when a company is all the way through the level 2 certification, they have looked at us as a real business benefit because the cost paid for itself, and they got the opportunity to improve their business along the way. And if we can continue to do that, I think it continues to make our company more valuable, and we build better partnerships. We find the right C3PAOs, the right IT companies, and then we find the wrong ones, and we help people steer away from that brick wall that they typically would have run into in the past. And that's ultimately why we're in the business at the end of the day.
That's some amazing insight, Greg. I hope that I don't know if there's any C3PAOs listening. I hope that some of them are smart enough to specialize and not just pretend like they can do everything, because that would really be better for us. I never considered the fact that as C3PAO, they're not interchangeable, that you could have better, faster, higher quality results with somebody who's special. But of course that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense naturally. But I had just never considered that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I hope there's some auditors out there listening, and they build a business that's specialized and not general purpose. Because that'd be helpful to us
very
all.
few out there. But we're gonna hopefully not manipulate the market, but we're gonna force hopefully the market to do what's best for the customer. And sometimes you need champions like that, whether it's in an organizational culture or in a market, to say we know what's best for the end user, whether it's a small, medium, large business in this space. And we're going to continue to make decisions based off of helping the market get there on its own. We definitely need more people for the mission. We can't do it ourselves. But I think if we can educate the customer to ask the right questions, then ultimately the C3PAOs, the IT companies, and companies that are similar to us, they end up making the decisions, or they go out of business because they didn't make the decision based off right for the customers. So that's I think our kind of longer term impact is if somebody can say, wow, the market has really changed based off of the education you've been able to provide to the customer and to the ecosystem. That's just another benefit and feather in our hat that we're hoping to stack on going forward.
I'm kind of also hoping that as it comes crunch time a year from now and the auditors are totally backlogged, that they get more and more motivated to finish audits quickly.
It's not the week-long process.
Right. So maybe that'll change as they start to feel the heat and they run up against their own resource limitations, because I'm sure they have their own business problems about recruiting talent, good talent, and training quickly. And then, their business model is a tough business model because they're going to have a huge surge of business for a couple of years, and then it's going to drop and level off. So hopefully the industry can navigate that, because a surge type business like that, I think is going to be difficult to sustain over a decade or whatever it needs to be.
On that point, a lot of the loudest voices in this space outside of the hard sell folks, more of the folks that try to educate and create awareness and they get business as a result of that, is they want the government to take back the audit function, which is very interesting because, from a business owner perspective, do you want your tax dollars, or don't you, or do you want your tax dollars to go to a function that those tax dollars pay for these audits to potentially take place versus having to make a corporate or commercial transaction? Obviously, there's problems that come along with that, and there are resource troubles. But that's something I think the audience should track, is that could be a very realistic thing where obviously there's companies that will always prepare you, but it's almost like the authority to operate model where you can get somebody from the outside, like a Valor, to come prepare you, but then ultimately the government or somebody that they bring on that is under the government umbrella is going to help you pass the authority to operate process. So something to look out for.
This is actually not new, a new challenge, believe it or not. It's actually about 75 years old. I used to work in the television industry, and certainly would seem totally unrelated to cybersecurity, but actually what you're talking about is what the FCC had to figure out 75 years ago when they started licensing TV stations. So in the broadcast industry, an RF signal or a TV channel needs to occupy a very, very specific part of the spectrum and nothing else. And they have to transmit a certain level of power. There's a lot of rules around the way they have to operate. And originally in the broadcast space, the FCC established a licensing process where you had to have a license in order to be an engineer at a TV station. And if that TV station was out of compliance, that was your license on the line. It was called an FCC, I think it was an FCC first class license it was called. Over time, the technology, the RF technology got a lot better, and there weren't as many problems with signals straying outside of their channels, and so they got rid of the FCC first class. But there is actually precedent for this that goes way, way back, where the government, I guess you could kind of call it maybe a private-public partnership, where where the employee of the commercial organization was, I guess that's sort of like a Hippocratic oath. They were entrusted, and also maybe threatened a little bit that, hey, as in your capacity as the engineer at this TV station, we have the ability to cancel your license. So,
well, if we start getting into canceling licenses to manufacture products into the defense industry, this country and this world is going to be in a huge situation of hurt. A hurt locker, if you will.
Well, I mean, is that actually different than where we are right now with CMMC, where we have
maybe
to,
not. Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. Which is why this was such a big topic. Which is why we wanted to talk about it, and why I think that it's really important for folks to start. If they're going to think slowly and act fast, they better start thinking slowly now. If they have not done so. So, Greg, do you have any gaps that we didn't cover that you'd like to share with folks that will encourage them to start thinking now?
Yeah, I think where rubber meets the road is the budget component. That is where I know some things in my business, that is where things keep me up when I don't know what the realistic budget for something that I really want to do is. And that stops me from thinking about it. And a lot of engineers think about the solution, so they want to have a clear roadmap to solution development and how to implement it. Mm-hmm. That brings its own challenges because we talked about the descriptive versus prescriptive. A lot of engineers are smart enough and educated enough to read that descriptive and make it prescriptive, but that budget piece is really critical. Early on, when I joined the cybersecurity space, there was something called protection complex. So a lot of the individuals in the space were, former CIA, former FBI, so three-letter agency folks, and they would go into these organizations that were tasking them with building a cybersecurity standard or building a program, and they brought a lot of that protection complex. So they didn't take the time to understand the business, the foundational components. They were just like, we need to shove this protection because we think you need to do it yesterday and we need to get on the fast track immediately, which is really egotistical from the partnership support perspective. And so making sure you push back on folks and get to the things that matter. So the scoping, the budget. Here's just a realistic budget of what we put together for multiple clients. And that is where we see business owners, the people signing the checks, as you guys mentioned, the authorizing authority, the person signing the dotted line to say, yes, we're doing this. We see them really get on board when they have a clear budget and a path forward to both how they can spend money on this over time. And that's that thinking slow versus just starting to spend money, hoping that the Band-Aid works to heal the wound. And making sure you have that in place. So, scoping, budget, make sure you start to kind of put some artifacts in to prove it. There's a lot of good folks in the ecosystem. I think I want to mention that because I know we've talked quite a bit about some of the pitfalls and some of the negativities, but there are good folks out there. And we're hoping to, just like you guys do through your podcast, is we brought some folks onto one of our channels that we believe are doing the right thing by the customer. And I think if we just continue to shine the light as an ecosystem, as people who are developing these solutions on the folks, the organizations, the people that are ultimately trying to do the right thing and not just padding their pockets at the end of the day. Obviously, money's important for business. It keeps the lights on and keeps us all fed and going forward. But making sure that we just kind of I think it'll naturally happen where the market will push those types of people out. But just want to mention the budget component because when you have somebody who has a protection complex, you'll realize, like we mentioned earlier, they won't really ask those deep business questions to help you self-discover. And then once you self-discover, you as an executive or you as an engineer are going to start to identify where you're going to need to spend some dollars. And then that partner or that person you're asking questions to can help you develop a budget that your CFO or the person that's looking at your budget monthly will really love and then become invested in. And I think that's where you start to get some of the business buy-in that a lot of companies, I'd say 75, 80% of companies still don't have buy-in to this. And that's why a lot of these things aren't taking place. And if we can just get more people to have the right pieces to the puzzle to start to see a little bit of a picture that benefits their business, and then they get compliant as a result, it's a national security benefit at the end of the day. That's why, looping back to the initial part of the discussion, that's why the government wants defense contractors, whether you're a prime or a sub, to have a cybersecurity standard at the end of the day, is because it's going to benefit them. There's going to be less incidents. We are going to come off stronger to nation states who are trying to attack us, who are right now walking in through an open door, and that looks bad on our country.
Well, that's an awesome mic drop. I love that.
Yep.
Thank you so much for that. Ariel, you got any closing thoughts?
I don't know how I'm supposed to follow up on that.
That was a truth bomb, man.
Yeah.
Mic drop it is.
Yeah.
Greg, you dropped a lot of truth bombs today, and you have a funny style of doing it so casually. But you say things, and I think, oh man, that is so insightful and correct based on our experience. So I hope that people really listen carefully to the things that you say today, Greg, because there's so much truth in those things, whether it's the descriptive versus the prescriptive, or understanding the nature of the business before you do anything, or the importance of scoping. Man, these are we've already learned those lessons the hard way,
Mm-hmm.
Simple ideas that we might not,
ideas
that we brush off, or you might
make all the difference.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate you, Greg, sharing those truth bombs with us. So
Absolutely.
I know it's going to improve our business, and hopefully it improves our audience's business.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Appreciate what you do for the defense industrial base. And, I told you guys early on, wanted to be real and raw with you guys, really give your audience a view into what this industry really looks like. And hopefully I was able to provide that today, and happy to continue the conversation with you guys and come on in the future as this continues to evolve.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Folks, I'm going to wrap this up with just this. You've given us a ton to think about. So on behalf of our guest, Greg Tomchick, my co-hosts, Ariel Carlson and Sean Wallace, start now, think slow, act fast, and dream big.